So it is just an enormous pleasure for me to welcome three of the great song composers of our time. And I'm just going to go in the order on the screen: Libby Larsen, Tom Cipullo, and Jake Heggie. And it's amazing to see all three of you together on the screen. And we're doing this because we all love song and because we love SongFest and we all have had a long association with it that has everything to do with your music and with songs. And we're just gonna chat a little bit. And I just can't wait for you to start talking and for me to shut up. So I'm going to start in the same order. I'm going to start with Libby and just sort of, Libby, how did you start composing songs and what connects you to song and word and what were some of your first songs, and tell us more.
I can tell you, thank you for sending the questions in advance because these are all like global questions. But I came to writing song quite naturally, I think. In grade school, believe it or not, I was interested in the sound of words because in my grade school, a couple of interesting things were happening in regards to this question. We, of course, were little kids just trying to command the English language, but we were also children's choirs who sang Gregorian chant in Latin. We didn't know what it meant, but we sang in Latin. And we were also taking television Spanish at the same time. So Don Miguel would come on the television and he would, we would say Spanish. And I just got interested in the musicality of words. So and I also had learned to read and write music in first grade as just part of our school curriculum. So I just started playing around with the words. My first song was Los Pollitos. It was about little chickens. But isn't that a cool, Los Pollitos. It's a great, anyway. So it just was natural, kind of a duck to water kind of thing that I would express, express music through song, which I've been doing since I was 5 years old.
I love it because it also sounds like some of it was literally the sounds of the words, not even necessarily the meaning or the background or the third level of background of the words, but just the sounds. It's very natural.
It was the sounds. It really was the musicality of language, I think. And then all the layers, come years and years and years and years of understanding how deep the meaning of a simple word like I is.
Right, and the many ways to set it, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful because Libby and I just did a little bit of a tech check, and we also did a little bit of a pre-interview, which was just us catching up. And you were telling me how you use also sounds not of singers or not of instruments, but of kind of nature most recently in your music, so it all kind of comes together.
Yeah, it does. In the studio, it's all coming together in a really interesting way, which I have a lot of time to work on right now. So I'm having fun. It's great.
Okay, wonderful. Tom, what about you?
How I came to song.
Yes.
Lovely to be here with you three wonderful people. I came to song when I was studying. It was a time when the prevailing aesthetic was, shall we say, more dissonant. And to write tonal music was considered backward. And so I fell into that. And I composed really horrible music that was not tonal or an expanded tonality. Because the hardest thing for a composer, I think, is to find out who you are. Because there's all these different ways of making music, there really are. But until you can plug into who you are, you can't get to them. You can't get to that hidden music. So I was under this pressure, I felt, I put it on myself probably, to write this austere music. But you discovered if you wrote for singers, your professors and your academic environment would cut you a little slack because they'd say, singers, well, they have to find their pitches. And isn't that hard? And then, of course, there's always a prejudice against singers who are the great geniuses of our times, really, when you think of it. So if I write for singers, well, then you can be more flexible and you can write tonal music. And then I found it. That's who I am. That's who I want to be. So And then I found that singers are so much fun to work with. And they actually do your music, and they're actually interested in new music in a way that a lot of other performers aren't, you know, and they're always programming it and singing it. And then, of course, the appeal of the text is so universal. But it's what drove me to song is tonality and its acceptance in the vocal. And in an era before tonality came back.
That's interesting. I think I played, didn't you study with Elias Siegmeister? I think I played some of his songs. They're very different from, I mean, I really like those songs. They're very different from yours.
Oh, yeah,
It's really interesting, kind of that trajectory of teacher to student.
He was a wonderful composer. One of those Nadia Boulanger students who could do anything. You know, I was quite in awe of him. And he was a bit austere. The biggest influence on me was David Del Tredici, because he made everything possible. You could do anything after him and it would be accepted.
Yeah. I have follow-up questions, but I probably shouldn't. I'm sorry. Jake, let's just by way of introduction, what about you?
Well, I started off not knowing anything about art song. It was musical theater and jazz songs and pop on the record player and on TV. And it was always fun. Music was always fun for me. And I always was drawn to singers. I don't know why, but the singers are what made it come to life for me and still do. The actual performers, how they can transform something and present it in a way that makes you, even if it's a song you know by heart or that you wrote, a great performer can make you hear your music in a different way that you never knew was possible. So it was always singers for me. And I have to say the great singers that really inspired me were like Streisand. She was huge in the 60s and 70s. The voice was so flexible and it was so much fun and it was beautiful. And then all the movie musicals that I saw from that period. And when I was, I had studied classical piano the whole time. And when my father committed suicide when I was 10. And shortly after that, I was always kind of shy, even though I like to have fun with my friends. I went very inward and really found my home and my grounding and empowerment in music. And I went and bought manuscript paper and decided I was going to start to write. And I started writing songs to my own lyrics. And I always thought I was going to write a musical. We moved to California when I was 16, and I wound up studying and taking lessons privately with Ernst Bacon through a wonderful group of women who were composers in the Bay Area who got together every month to share their music. And they invited me, 16-year-old me, in, and I started playing them some of my own songs. And they said, you know, you can set other people's texts. And I said, you can? And they started opening up the world of art song to me and poetry. And Ernst Bacon was all about Emily Dickinson and Whitman and these great American poets. And just sort of, it was one of those moments where the top of my head flew off and I just realized there was enormous possibility. And I think that passion for song, Schubert, Schumann were my initial guides. Chopin on the piano. And so I moved to Paris and I studied there and it just went exponentially from there. And that's when I started hearing great singers live in person. I heard Jesse Norman and Janet Baker and all these, Arlene Auger, all these great singers in Europe. And then I came here and I heard Leontine Price and all of these. Then I wound up on stage turning pages for them at recitals. And it was just a very heady time of learning. And that marriage of great poetry, music, and the performers, masterful performances, I think that's what really set it off for me from the beginning and has just increased exponentially. It's what still draws me in now.
That's wonderful. I love hearing sort of the beginnings of things and the trajectory of people, and I have sort of thoughts where all of that has led each one of you. Because SongFest is kind of a community of performers that comes together along with the composers. To what degree do all of you write for performers and for specific performers with specific performers in mind? How does that connect in your music, or do you kind of just write the song and you goes out into the world?
Well, I'll say I
go ahead.
I have to know who I'm writing for, whether it's a song or an opera or whatever, because you know, when you're dealing with a blank canvas, it's narrowing everything into focus. And someone says, write a song for soprano. I have no idea what that means. There's like 20 different kinds of sopranos, and each of them has a different personality and range and color. So knowing who you're writing for, and then if I do get a commission where I really want to do the project, but I don't know who I'm writing it for, I have to imagine a great singer that I am writing it for. And then, because then if you write the song well, other people will show up who can do it really, really well. It's very important to me to collaborate with that person and know who I'm writing for.
You know, I always write for somebody I know who is going to sing the piece, and have forever. And you're right, Jake. You know, every voice is different. There really is no generic soprano, tenor, baritone, even though we like to think there is. There isn't. And I, like you, if I don't exactly know the person that I'm going to, the instrument that I'm working with, which is the way I think of it, you know, then I try to put the best one I've got in my head, you know, in the foreground, you know, and write for that. And you know, there's tricks with that. You know, if you're writing for Arlene Auger's voice, but you're working with a freshman in college, you know, who will develop that way. You know, I guess that's where the craftsmanship comes in. Yeah, but yeah, I'm inspired by great voices. Yeah, truly, truly inspired by great voices. You know, I'm a big Aretha Franklin fan. I actually tried to meet her. She was singing in the lingerie department at Dayton Hudson's department store when I was a teenager. Think of it. And so I went there to see if I could meet her, and I sat at her feet, but I was too afraid to say anything. But what a voice, you know. Oh, you know, there is an American coloratura. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
Ella Fitzgerald too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Major coloratura. Yeah.
Major.
Yeah. Okay, Tom, your turn.
It's a delicate dance, of course, because you want to tailor something to the person who commissions it, and it is, I'm sure we all agree, it's our job to make them sound terrific. And you know, I always say the best thing is if I don't really believe this, but I say it, the best thing is if the people leave the hall and they forget about the composer, but they just say, "Did you hear when that person sang that song?" Right? That's an awful goal that I pretend to have. So what do you do beyond us years to get them to make it so it can be universal, but it's tailored for a person? A lot of times, if I'm not sure about the singer, I write from my voice, but my voice and my imagination, because I think I'm a singer, and I think I'm a great singer, and I think I can float a high A, and I think I can do it. And I'm never wrong, and I never disappoint myself.
But I find that when you're faced with the unknowns when you're faced with the unknowns of a composition, there are so many unknowns. When you first read the poem that you're going to set, you want to feel music, even though you may not know what that music is. You get that shiver, and then you think it's the right project for that singer and that pianist for this situation, and it feels like the right time that you must write that song. And so, yeah, you write it for that person. But then what I find is if I write a song well for that person, it will be attractive enough to other people that then they show up and they make it their own. Each singer has to make it their own.
Yeah.
And if you've done your work well, you'll find very surprisingly that many, many, many different kinds of singers will want to do it and can make it their own. And that means different voice types too. Like, you remember, I wrote these early on, these songs with Flicka von Stade, and were very specific to her youth and raising her daughter, Lisa. It's called Paper Wings, and she wrote the cycle. It was very tailored to her. And now I hear then I heard a countertenor do it, and I heard a young tenor do it, and I've heard sopranos do it. And it's like, there's something that they respond to, and so they want to make it their own. And I think that's what we all yearn for, is something that speaks universally and specifically, but it will never speak broadly if it isn't clear and specific to start with.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
What I was thinking as you were talking is that probably initially it's about kind of focusing your inspiration in the moment where you need to put the music on paper and kind of imagining it, and then probably the more specific the task. I have heard from composers and writers that the kind of the more specific the prompt, in a way, the more liberating it is, and the easier the ideas come, and then singers can make it their own. I wonder also about how much you're. I think particularly of you, Jake, and maybe we can actually start by hearing an excerpt of a song of yours. I feel like your cycles are so tailored also to singers' personalities. Like I feel like your songs and your cycles are so strong characters. I mean, is that
Well,
true?
I am a theater composer, probably first and foremost, and so I'm very visual when I write. It's not only knowing who the singer is, but picturing them, how they're going to do the cycle, what it will look like, what it will feel like to be in the audience. I imagine myself in the audience, as well as the sounds that they make and the range, and imagining them. So it's all that for me, which is, I guess, I've always been drawn to the theater and to the more theatrical and to storytelling enormously. And so it does start with that, like Libby was saying, knowing a singer's personality as well as their voice, and really making it work for them. And then also being flexible for that performer. You know, it may seem like something felt really right when I was writing it, and then they say, you know, that vowel's going to be really ugly up there for me.
Yeah.
Could we possibly here's what I could do instead. I love that collaboration with the singer too, where they say, I can't give you this and make it pretty, but I could do this instead, or this, and together you find an option that works. But yeah, it has to work right for the singer, and be full of personality and heart and fun and grace and all the things that are required.
Libby,
Yeah.
Tom, are you both? I mean, I know the answer to that because I've worked with both of you on your music, but our audience may not. Are you both open to that as well? How much is that a collaboration? The first time a piece gets done by somebody, how much is that a collaboration?
Well, I think, yeah, that's a lot of fun. And, you know, now that we're all stuck apart, that's one of the things we miss the most, isn't it? It's that sort of interaction where you can have with someone and share that and learn from them. Because what are you doing it for if you can't be making music with other people? It is communication after all. It's fun. I mean, I like to think I'm a control freak and I'm in charge. But of course, once I get with someone, I realize I'm not. And
Powerless.
And of course, and if you really respect the artist you're with, and you know, I think we've all been lucky to work with wonderful artists. We know the more freedom we give them, the better we're going to sound, and the more we're going to learn, and the more useful it's going to be. You know, my friend Paul Sperry, when he commissions, he always says, when I commission a composer, I let them choose the text. I may give them some rough things because that way you get their best work if you give them that freedom. And I think in a similar way, when you work with a singer, you give them a little freedom to say, as Jake says, I do this here. This is my best note. I can do anything on that note. You know, I hate singing this note. It just takes us in wonderful ways. And as you say, restriction is a great thing. I was thinking the other day about Tchaikovsky composing the Nutcracker when he was told, I have to have 64 measures of music here, you know, 128. And it's just so inspired and amazing. It's all thrilling.
That's true. Libby, I don't know. I sometimes feel like your master classes, even because you're just also such an open, humble person, sometimes they're like workshops. You know, every master class, and you just, you know, you're so open.
Yeah. I look at it's so much fun talking with you guys. I wish we could do this regularly. I look at master classes as an opportunity to collaborate. To collaborate and to make something. I too think I'm a control freak, but I learned really early on, you know, what an illusion that is. You know, if you put on paper, the best you can possibly do, given the set of tools we have, you know, which are pretty meager, then, the rest is collaboration, not mediation. You know, the only mediation is the score. So, you know, I love to rehearse, you know, because we can find what the piece is, so that it's not ours. It's not the performer's, it's not mine. It's not, you know, we need an audience. you know, and we won't know until we have all of that together. What is this piece of music? You know, sometimes I love working with younger singers, less experienced singers who haven't really encountered us, we composers yet. You know, in each masterclass, watching the singer and the collaborative pianist, but generally more it's the singers, because the collaborative pianists are collaborative pianists, but the singer, you know, growing into their own confidence, that you know, that what they bring to the piece makes it new, you know, and makes it theirs. Yeah, for me, those are the most exciting moments. You know, is all.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. 100%. When you see that light bulb go off and somehow you've communicated something and suddenly they realize how it connects to their life personally, and that they have a voice, it's actually, they're not just reading what's on the page, they're performing it and being it and inhabiting it the same way you did when you wrote the piece.
Yes.
You know, it takes all of you entirely. And when you feel that commitment happen from a singer, it's really thrilling.
It is.
And give them the freedom to like stay a little longer on that phrase, or, you know, your voice is so warm right there. Really enjoy this word, taste the words, feel them, experience them.
Right.
I'd love to say comments on something Tom said, because I agree. Anytime someone has given me a poem and said, here's some money, please set this poem for me, it never turns out well. If I have to be on fire with that text, I know both of you, it has to be the same. I hear it in your music.
Yeah.
You have to really feel it in your bones, and it's falling in love with it. And you can't, arranged marriages very rarely work, you know, and you can think, oh, I should love this poem. This poem is perfect for me. But if it's not resonating, then it's not going to be a good song.
Yeah.
And I have found that through hard experience.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
Like a poem that does not move you at all, 1 year, something will change in your life, you come back to it, and suddenly it's riveting.
Yeah.
And you know, it is burning inside you. So that's a
biggest example for me of that is when I was a teenager, I bought the complete Emily Dickinson poems, you know, and I still have that volume. It is like falling to pieces. It's just basically separate pages, but it's, you know, you go through it. And I remember things that inspired me so much when I first went through, but I'm like, that doesn't mean anything to me now. And things that I passed by that now are just inflame my imagination. It really does depend on where you are in your life at that moment. And it's the same for a performer. You know, they have to gravitate towards something that really speaks to them in the moment.
Which makes me think, Lisa, that, you know, one of the questions that you sent to us.
No, yes, just
you know, it had to do with what, you know, why art song? What's the importance of art song? You know, and maybe we could open up this conversation. You know, I thought, well, I thought because of the text. For me, it's always the text. You know, that we have these, you know, distilled works of genius like Emily Dickinson, you know, who I agree with you, Jake, you know, that at one particular time I was on fire with, you know, one of her poems, you know, and now when I read it, I'm taken back to that moment in my own life, you know, but I've sort of grown, you know, I'm not that person anymore. But each song that we write, Tom, your songs, oh man, I have a dog who's barking next door today. And I was just, you know, we create these, you know, these moments, you know, that are so important. You know, they're not the generalization. They're not the grand sweep. They're, you know, they're the moment that puts our lives together. Yeah. You know, when we can't have opera these days, guess what? Everybody's singing art song.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think of the whole thing, Libby and Tom, just to go off on that a little bit, as for me, great texts, you know, a great text or story is like a well.
Yeah.
It's like a rich well or a mine. And, you know, a writer went in there and through that human experience or passion or that lack or something that was missing or something that they wanted or something that happened to them or is about to happen to them. They created this magnificent poem. Well, then our job as composers is not just to look at that poem and set that. We have to go in the well too and see how that resonates and feels for us. And then we do our best to get that on the page, but then the singer and the pianist or whoever they are, they have to go in the well too. The worst thing is when they just, do what's on the page without having taken a trip to the well. And I think in the master classes, that's what we try to do, is we try to give them a ticket or a trip through that mine, through that well, to tell them, glean from this experience and then bring that to the poem and to the song. And it's going to vibrate, because what we're all about is capturing vibrations, these vibrations that are going on all the time. And we try to put them on paper. And what you said, Libby, it doesn't belong to you after we give it away. It's all about doing it, working really hard to give it away. And that's what singers and pianists and performers do. They have to do all the technique and everything so that you can give it away. And that vibration can enter someone else, and transform them the way it did you.
Do you ever, Tom, this is for you, and Jake, do you ever feel a moment where it's actually yours to give away?
Oh yeah, I think it's all about me. And I've often said when I write a song, I used to think that when I was writing a song, I was somehow illustrating it or trying to find another level. But I don't think that anymore. I don't think that's what I do. I don't think that's what a lot of composers do. What I do is when I write a song, I'm giving you my reaction to the words. It's all about, and as egotistical as that sounds, I think it's less egotistical than saying I'm going to somehow enhance Emily Dickinson, which is this perfect jewel. And why is anybody interested in my reaction to Emily Dickinson? Only because we're all interested in each other. And as we accumulate as a body, we come to a whole new level. And then the singer, as Jake Libby says, is going to take that and make it their own. No one wants to ape the emotion of another. There's no art there, none. There's only art when you make it. It has to first be all about you. I give it to you, now it's all about you.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really true. And giving young singers especially permission to take that journey is really key to what SongFest does really well, and why Rosemary brings the people because you have to have your technique down. You have to do the research. You have to do all of that work, but then you have to leave it at the door and go on stage and be this living, vibrant being that has a story to tell us or an experience to tell us, and you've made it your own. So it sounds deeply personal and true.
Yeah, and this brings us to why is SongFest so important? And I was thinking, the first year I came to SongFest, I had no idea what to expect. And I and sometimes that's still true, but I came away with so many things. But one of the things that I've taken with me ever since was that this whole process, at least for me, helps. Doesn't help me. It lets me own my own vulnerability. That in fact, that place where I feel vulnerable, which is always in the composing process, because you're right, Tom, it is all about, it has to be about you, before you can give it away. At least I feel that too. But it's vulnerability is a tough issue for human beings, but because of the people that Rosemary brings together at SongFest, and because of the way we all work with each other, it's not only safe, it's desirable, to get in touch with, not in touch, to be like comfortable in your own vulnerability. And I don't know a better way to say it. And so I just thought I would bring that up. It's wonderful. The kinds of artists we're all experienced, we're all here, we're pretty much every one of us pretty centered in who we are. But the real joy is watching, is being with the newer performers who become that, who become themselves, and then join the family, I guess. I don't know how else to put it.
I love that. Join the family. Yeah, because I tell young performers all the time that the world can be a very, very lonely place, and music, preparing and working on it, can be very lonely. But when you're in music, you're never really alone.
Yeah.
You are surrounded by an enormous family. And I think welcoming people into the fold the way Rosemary does is so powerful. And every single one of those people that goes through the program becomes an ambassador of song.
Yeah.
And that's what we need out in the world. We need ambassadors of song who are passionate with it, who are ready to share that passion and ignite other imaginations and bring it into the world. And it's just amazing to be part of that. Because like Libby and Tom, I feel like I've learned so much from you, listening to your music, watching the way you work with singers, hearing how singers respond to your work. It's really powerful. It's a remarkable exchange of ideas and emotions and perspectives that SongFest. Rosemary is amazing.
I think we can all agree on that. I was wondering, do you have any specific memories of things that, I mean, I'm sure you do. I have memories of watching your master classes. I mean, people crying and people having epiphanies and no, I mean, for good reasons,
Oh no, I had a bad experience.
No, but it really did. Actually, one of my favorite things about singers is the vulnerability. I think a part of it is something, as a pianist, you don't look into the eyes of the audience. Right. You look here, and it's very easy to be in the bubble. And there's just something so incredibly brave. I always think about the singer just facing the audience, facing you in a masterclass for the first time. They've been working on your song for, a year. So do you have any memories you'd like to share? I don't know if I'd love to start with Tom, unless you don't want to be put on the spot.
Sure. One of them would be, and this goes to what Libby said about join the family, and Jake said about what a wonderful learning environment it is how much people who go there to teach learn at the same time. Because I can remember sitting in on all these master classes, and everyone I learned something that is, I feel like as you get older, everyone says the same thing. Oh, if I could only be a student again. But in music, we're students all the time, right? We never stop. But imagine now we have this concentrated learning, and it is just as exciting for the people who have come ostensibly to teach as it is for the people who've signed on to come as students. So it's at such a level, such an incredible level, that it's thrilling. Now, I'm not going to cite any specific master classes because I'll leave somebody out. But that is one thing that I just loved about SongFest. And then I was there, and everyone's working on a piece of mine that Rosemary was kind enough to commission called Insomnia. And I just had such a wonderful feeling of camaraderie with 10 singers and these wonderful pianists, one of whom I'm looking at right now. And just had such a great, rich, fun, emotional, joyous time. These are the things we live for.
Are there any other stories that anybody would be willing to share?
Oh, I have one. I have actually two. Well, one of my favorite experiences in SongFest is when the concerts finally happen after you've done all the classes and everything. And it's all the different singers, and sometimes, we're involved as composers, but the joy backstage and afterwards, everyone's celebrating after a song concert. What an amazing thing to celebrate, that we made music together, that we explored words, poetry, ideas, different musical perspectives and ways of doing things. And now it makes me want to cry, because it's really what it's all about, the joy of making that music together. The one class I will cite that actually moved me to tears, Graham Johnson was talking about the legacy of Schubert scholarship. And he talked about Schubert's life and his work, and then the line of people who devoted their lives to making sure that legacy lived on and was correctly moved forward, that editions were clear, letters, stories about him and the concerts and everything, that all went through. And I remember in the auditorium watching 200 young people hanging on his every word about Schubert, about song, about poets, about the responsibility of cultivating and curating and keeping this alive and moving it forward. And I was just weeping. Nobody was looking at their phone. Nobody was looking away. Everyone was riveted. And I thought, this is worth everything. That is a particular moment. I mean, I've had so many with the different classes that I've sat in, but that was one that really just, I thought, this is what it's all about. This is why we work so hard at this.
Yeah, I can add stories, but these are such wonderful stories already. Yeah. Oh, but I do want to say one thing. Every single masterclass with a collaborative pianist is astounding to me, and I think it's because maybe it's my own arrogance. When I first came to SongFest, I pretty much thought I had it. I don't play the piano well. I already know that, so I write. I write to those who play better. But I did not understand the depth of collaboration. With the pianist and the singer. I came and it's influenced my entire life. And every time I come home from SongFest, my husband Jim will say, "You've been with the pianists." And it's really true that being around Graham Johnson, Martin Katz, Margot Garrett,
Margot,
Liza, I don't know if you understand how important it is for us as composers, to really be
well, and to hear Graham Johnson talking about working with Britten and pairs, to hear Margot talk about working with Barber, it's just like, what? Remarkable. Yeah.
I could talk to you, truly forever. It's a privilege. Should I make you do some work? Because I asked each one of you.
Look at Tom.
Look at Tom. I had asked each one of you because we're talking so much about words and songs to read a poem, and I was wondering if you would in fact be willing to do so, and just maybe put the poem in context and why you picked it. Would anybody like to go first?
Sure, I'll do it.
Tom, okay.
By Robert Hayden, called Those Winter Sundays. Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and feel the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? And I just love that poem. It's Robert Hayden's probably most famous poem. It was written in 1962, and he was the first African-American poet laureate of the US, back when they called it consultant to the Library of Congress, but that was a post. And one of the pieces I'm most proud of is called America 1968. And it's six texts by him. Some of them have to do with the Vietnam War, some just generally about the time, some about Civil War and, civil rights and riots. And this one, what does this one have to do with America 1968? Well, it had to do with my America 1968 and my relationship. So I put it in there. For me, it's a very special poem and a piece I'm very proud of.
I love this poem and I love your setting of it, Tom. Thank you for
Thank you.
Emily Dickinson. Find me. I still can sing. Vanish. My mandolin strikes true within. Slay. And my soul shall rise, chanting to paradise, still thine. When you asked a poem, I thought, oh, and then I thought this poem, which has been in my heart for decades, is completely appropriate all the time, and right now, how many of us are bound in so many ways, and still singing, any way we can, even though we're banished, here we are. Our mandolins are striking true within, I don't know what hope is, except I know that we all have it, and I don't know what faith is, and it's a good thing to have. And I'll tell you, when I first set this poem, I thought it was a gender issue. I've been doing this now for 45, almost 50 years, and it's been a gender issue for a long time. But that's melted away and been replaced by, I guess, by the experience of living, to understand that each one of us can choose to be bound and still sing, and can choose to be slain and still rise. So I don't mean to get so intense and deep, but I'm devoted to this poem. I love this poem. And as you know, if you've ever performed it, there's barely any music coming from the piano, which, this potential of a 9-foot Steinway and sounds great, all bound up. Anyway, yes, that's it. I pass.
Jake.
Yes.
I don't know what you ended up picking, so I'm surprised.
Well, it's interesting. I had an interesting year of songwriting because I actually worked with Margaret Atwood this year on a cycle for a baritone named Josh Hopkins in response to the murder of his sister a few years ago. And Margaret wrote this amazing cycle called Songs for Murdered Sisters about the epidemic of violence against women all over the world. And I was going to read one of those, but then I also wrote a cycle for Jamie Barton this year called What I Miss the Most. And in April, I asked 5 different authors, writers, friends, most of them are not actually writers, to, if they, in April, it was this late April, so it was about a month and a half into lockdown and, the first time we went through this. And I asked them to write about what they were missing the most in their lives. And it's interesting now because April feels like almost a naive kind of time. It was before all the civil unrest, the George Floyd murder, Breonna Taylor, all of that, the horrible things that we've witnessed over the past few months. And so I want to read the 5 women who wrote things were Joyce DiDonato wrote a poem, Patti LuPone wrote a beautiful text, Sister Helen Prejean wrote something, Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote a 2-line thing for me, and of course she passed away in September. But I want to read the last one, which is by a pianist, Kathy Kelly, wonderful pianist and conductor. And it's that experience of what we're doing right now. So each of the songs, the cycle's called What I Miss the Most, and each of them has the first one is order, then it's time, then it's action. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote about music, missing music made in unison. And Kathy wrote a poem called You. And I have to read it because it's emotional and I'm afraid I'm going to forget something. There you are, your voice, your hair, the frayed neck of my old shirt draping the rise of your collarbone. No one else. It's you. It's all of your things. You look up to the right when you search for a word. You look down with a smile, then straight at the camera, your wide eyes. I see you see me. You purse your lips to tell me what you will not say. I thought I would say it's a sad substitution, but my fatigued eyes would gaze at you all day. At night, you move across the screen of my eyelids. In the morning, you call. Your hand is in your hair. You look away through that other window. I bow toward the screen. I take a long drink of your invisible breath. I think it's so beautiful, so moving, and it's an experience we can all relate to. And when I was writing it, I was thinking of so many faces of people that I love and have missed so much, some who are no longer on the planet. But we have these, you know, when you're looking through old pictures and videos and suddenly somebody's talking to you from 10 years ago, that experience is just, it's so rich and amazing. And it could only happen, you know, recently, you know, in the pandemic 100 years ago, they didn't have that experience, but we have that experience. And so it felt right to include it in the cycle. And I love working with living writers, you know, as we all do. I love the dead people too. I just, you know, it's, they're so inspiring, and there's something so formidable about, you know, that poem exists and its architecture is established. You can't call the writer and say, what about this? Or could we, you know, change this line? But when working with a living writer, you can do that. It's flexible and it's open. Although Margaret Atwood wrote like perfect poems that I didn't have to say a word about, you know. But I love that collaboration and being able to reach out to the writer, and because composition is lonely, it is isolated, it is a lot of time alone. So working with a living writer, working with a performer, you know, all of that makes it less lonely and isolated.
That's really beautiful. And, you know, and I'm thinking of Kathy Kelly, who is also just such a warm and giving and amazing person. If we had a fifth screen here, she would have been perfect. So thank you for sharing that. So I was wondering what we could kind of end with. Maybe of the two excerpts that each one of you chose, maybe each one of you could pick one.
Who wants to go first?
Take your time. I'm going to edit out any awkward silence.
Okay.
No, I'm happy to go first.
Okay, you do it, Tom.
All right. This was recorded at SongFest, and it's from the cycle Insomnia, which is a whole group of duets, solo songs, duets. I think there are a couple of quartets, maybe 3 quartets in it, and it's called Insomnia. This particular poem was called Insomnia by Dana Gioia, and I think we retitled it House because we had something else that the title it was Insomnia. And the performers are the wonderful baritone Michael Anthony McGee, who's a dear friend and a fabulous, fabulous talent, and our dear Lisa playing the piano. And then this is the part of the SongFest CD, right?
Yep, it is. American Songs at SongFest, and all 3 of you are obviously part of that CD. That was, I administratively mostly helped make it happen. That was a wonderful thing to put together with just all the talent on it. Was just amazing. The commissions of SongFest over the years.
mortgaged wall, shifting in discomfort, and voices mounting in an endless drone of small complaints, like the sounds of a family that ear by ear you've learned how to ignore.
A little excerpt.
Great
Yeah,
to hear
that.
you play.
Oh,
Great to hear you play. Thank you for doing it so
It's-
beautifully.
it's a wonderful piece. And you and Michael, a special collaboration. Also, that the other cycle that you wrote for him. It's very
The two
special.
premiered, yes, in
Mm.
Texas. Yeah, it's a great joy to know him as a person and as a performer. But I never get to see him. He's always in, I don't know, maybe when this is all over, I hope so.
Yes.
When this is all over, I hope that there are a lot of encounters will happen.
I hope so.
The reunions, yes.
Yeah.
I hope that they're going to be just wonderful. Don't you all think?
Yeah,
Just
they
kind
will
of the
be.
joy of
They will.
With enormous gratitude for the privilege of being together, which we
Yeah.
always took for granted, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
I'll go. Which one do you want to hear, Liza? I mean, they're very contrasting. One is very funny and wry, which is a song called Edna St. Vincent Millay on a poem by Lucy Miller Murray. Let's do Edna St. Vincent Millay. It's very funny. And Simone McIntosh and Leona Chung are the performers. And Simone is now an Adler Fellow up at the San Francisco Opera and doing amazing things. And first met her when she was, really young in SongFest, and then she was in Marilla, and now she's off and running. But she was like so perfect performing this song. It was on a concert a few years ago, and it's very, very funny. And actually, Lucy is a good friend, and she's shared many poems with me over the years. And this one it was one of those that was just like, yeah, that one, that's mine. I want to set that one. Because we all know who Edna St. Vincent Millay was, and maybe you've set some of her poetry. I have, but this song is just a really fun take.
It's fabulous. It's a fabulous song and a fabulous performance. So memorable.
Amazing performance.
No, I must not be Edna St.
Sorry to stop. I
She's
didn't know.
such a wonderful performer.
Oh, fabulous.
It's a very silly
Fabulous.
song, but
Great.
a lot
No,
of fun.
It's wonderful. I think of you talked about theater, and I think of actors so much when I watch some of these really wonderful, talented singers perform.
Oh, yeah.
And comedic timing is so difficult. The tragic timing is difficult, but so is comedic timing.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things too that SongFest helps these singers learn is you can't just stand there. You can't just be a singer. You have to be a singing actor. And that means finding that strength to be still, to present a song and still be a vibrant singing actor, or ham it up when you need to, because the range of what you're going to perform as a singer now is so vast.
Mhm.
So to have that flexibility, we demand a lot of singers. Like you said, they're very brave people. And it takes an enormous amount of courage and to be vulnerable on the stage and to be open and to find that to be that energized stillness that gives you freedom to be big even when you're small. It's remarkable.
I think I will ask if we can do the second song from Sifting Through the Ruins, the piece called To the Towers Themselves, which is which I think illustrates collaboration. We've been talking a lot about collaboration, and these are songs that I wrote with Suzanne Mentzer, who has been on faculty at SongFest, and one of my true heroes, James Dunham, violist, and at the time, Craig Gutenberg, although we have the privilege of hearing you in this particular performance. Why I say collaboration is that no one commissioned us to write these pieces. We were just all in a room together, I think sharing grief about the 9/11 incident. And we started talking about that each one of us had been asked to, to contribute our talents, to write something. In my instance, my publisher said, "Would you please write an anthem? It'll sell like hotcakes." And I found myself saying, well, and each one of us said, we'd really like to make our own piece. Let's make our own piece. And the result is this piece, Sifting Through the Ruins, for viola, mezzo, piano, and composer. So the way the text came about is that Suzanne went to the site and collected poetry, reactions, all kinds of things. And we then worked together choosing what we might want to set. This particular text is anonymous. We have no idea who wrote the text. And the Parks Department in New York collected this text, and it was part of an exhibit in New York. And this is I don't want to say it's an homage to the towers themselves. It's an interesting text that talks about towers. It says they were never my favorites. They weren't the Carmen Miranda Chrysler building. This is a person who knows New York architecture. Just saying that the towers themselves, he says, anonymous says, they were two young, dumb guys swaggering across the skyline. And then says, now that they are gone, we feel this absence. And then the text says they were lost like cannon fodder, like farm boys throughout time, stunned to death. And I just thought, that's a text I want to set. That's a war text, but it's like nothing I've ever heard before. We all said, yeah, let's do this. And then, and the real result is this particular song that has sirens in it and horror in it and humor in it. And and the American penchant to iconicize itself, without an icon evolving, just stamp on an icon like the Chrysler Building. Anyway, it's my kind of text, and here's the song.
Rockefeller's magic boxes, nor the empire, which I think would have killed us all if she fell. They were two young guys swaggering across the skyline. They were two young, dumb guys, beer drinking and bees, swaggering across the skyline. Not too bright. Like cannon fodder, like farm boys throughout time, stunned to death, not knowing what hit them, and beloved by the weeping mothers left behind. Amazing performances, amazing, and so much a collaboration of all of our hearts, all of our hearts. Yeah, and I'm just not sure, without places like SongFest, for us to just all come together, and even a discussion like this is, it's a gem. I don't know how the art form can develop any better than this. It's great. So glad we're here together today, even though I can't hug you all.
Virtually. I mean, this it's been my experience just working with Rosemary for 10 years. She's ultimately a yes person. We need to bring in a violist. Yes. We need to do this. Yes. I mean, sometimes it takes, sometimes, logistics of things get complicated, but it all somehow comes together for the best.
Yeah.
It's really special. I mean, it was an honor to sit behind these two great artists in this particular performance. And it's an honor today. So with you three amazing artists, what last words of wisdom do you have for our mostly probably young singers and pianists watching? Maybe some of their teachers, art song lovers, especially during this difficult time.
Well, I would say everything that you are learning and working on and striving for is invaluable and essential and will inform the rest of your life, no matter where you go or what you do. It will enrich your life and the lives of those you encounter and come across and collaborate with, whatever field you wind up pursuing. My first time with SongFest was 22 or 23 years ago. It was a long time ago when it was at UCLA. It was very young. And Rosemary's optimism and enthusiasm and excitement was was palpable even then. And it's just been wonderful to watch it grow and evolve. And what it convinces me of is music is essential, and it is essentially optimistic. Music is about what lies ahead of us. It's about a goal that we reach, this perpetuation of this vibration, this big human vibration that we gather to recognize and celebrate and experience and share. And then we move on from there. But it's always about something down the road and in the future. And I think that's one of the things that I love the most about music and song, is we tell our stories, but we tell them in a way that we have no idea how they're going to resonate for someone in that room or for someone beyond what we might know. And so hold on to the optimism of that and the connection. We will be back in the room together again, and it will be more valuable than ever.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Everything that you said is perfect. Yeah. And also, I think I mentioned hope before. You know, I think that the fact that we breathe and then heighten our breath and it becomes song, you know, is essential. You know, and just that it's really true. You know, no matter where life takes you, you know, the ability to go inward and then come out again in song is sacred. And I think if we can all remember that, especially if you're feeling down or that the meaning of your life is in question, just breathe in and breathe out song, and you'll know who you are. You're here with us today, you know, and we're here with you, and we always will be. And that's SongFest.
Well, I have nothing to add from a spiritual or emotional or deeply personal point of view to what my two brilliant colleagues just said. They said it much more eloquently than I ever will. I'm optimistic now and touched by the beauty of it. So I'll just say, if there are any singers out there, please remember, when it comes to song, most of the time, it's all about the harmony, not the melody, all about the harmony. That's all I'll say.
That's just wonderful. You all are just so special. I mean, I usually only experience this magic in June, so I've been touched by this magic in January, and so thank you so much for that. It's just been really special to see you all and hear you.
Great to see you, Lisa. Thanks for bringing us together, and long live SongFest.
Long live SongFest, indeed.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you.
Happy birthday, SongFest.
Such a youngie, 25.
I know,
Right.
Just coming of age.
Oh, to be 25.
It is my extraordinary pleasure to be in your company today. Thank you so much for making the time to talk to us at SongFest. William Bolcom, John Musto, John Harbison, you're three of my heroes in the composing world, and you have been associated with the festival for a long time. So it's so fitting that we could bring you together for this 25th anniversary celebration. So without further ado, let's jump right into the questions. Since we are talking about SongFest, tell us a little bit about your association with the festival, when it began, and what you have done there over the years, maybe what it's meant to you, any memorable occurrences. Maybe John Harbison, maybe we should start with you, because I think you've been at SongFest since 2003.
Yeah, I think at least. It was in one of its earlier locations. It moved around from various branches of the California state university system. Irvine, perhaps, maybe, what might have been one of the first occasions. And it was actually very much what it is, in the sense it was an institution about art song, and I think at that time, or maybe still, much more deeply devoted to that central concern than really any other institution in the country. So what struck me about it immediately was how welcome it was to its constituency, particularly singers and players. Um, from the very first, I remember very, very high quality pianists and singers coming to sing mainly at the time new art song, but there was this certain element of classics, but that was an early emphasis. And extremely odd thing that I noticed, which is that everybody, all the performers were well prepared, which I don't know what that magic was. I'd like to ask Rosemary Heiler about the trick, because that really wasn't my experience in most of the rest of the world.
Exactly.
You know, you'd come in and say, hey, what about, let's get that together, or let's try to count that correctly. The singers were well prepared, and that's somehow remained a very, you would say, simple but essential element in the way SongFest works, because a lot happens fast. People come in, do a lot of music in a very short space, and still to this day, I'd have to say I go away with an abiding impression of how ready people are to do the things they were coming to SongFest to do. The years, I think we all experienced some of the years in Pepperdine, where the site was certainly a part of the experience. You know, getting that big view of the Pacific Ocean and the United States volleyball team practicing on the campus. There was something about that aura which was rather extraordinary, but it's so much in the best sense still the way it was conceived, is what I would say about thinking back to the first times.
John, just to follow up with you just a little bit on this. So looking at your projects that you've done there over the years, one of the really interesting ones that happened just before I came in 2009, but I think in 2004-ish, you chose 7 young composers to write songs for participants, because commissioning and work with new composers is a huge part of SongFest, really a central part of SongFest, and festival has commissioned each one of you, I think, over the years. So John, could you tell us a little bit about that 2004 project?
That was a strong, they were young then, I guess. Some of those songs are still out and around. Jim Primash's pieces, Anna Wiesner. It was a very, very strong cohort of composers. And again, they all said that thing that I just mentioned, that they were so delighted that the performers were ready to go with their pieces. Performers they, of course, had not met before. That project, I think, was, it had an aura of enthusiasm. It never had that sort of chalk dust quality that sometimes a new music project will have. Everybody was excited, enthusiastic, and it's always fun for me to hear those pieces again, since a lot of them are out, in that culture, in the vocal culture.
John Musto, I'm just gonna kind of go clockwise. What about you? I think you were the next person to join SongFest in maybe 2008. Am I right?
Yes, it was 2008, and Rosemary called me about going, and we did a big piece for 4 singers, SATB and piano, called Book of Uncommon Prayers, a 15-minute piece. And so it was a big chunk, and we had to fill out the rest of the program, after intermission. So we talked about it, and Rosemary asked me, what other things of mine I wanted to do. And I just said, you know what, that's enough of this highfalutin stuff. Why don't we have the second half be American Songbook? And so that's what we did. we did a half a program of American Songbook, and it became, what it is now. We've done it we've closed the festival with it every year. And I think last time we did it, it started out with 6 people in 08, and we had 53 people on stage. It's actually getting a little out of hand, but it's always, and we do it with the same discipline that we would do Schubert songs or anything else. But it's I think it's important to have that particular area of American music represented, and both Bill and John are very involved with American Songbook. And so I've been there every so often we do a recital of my own things. And that's, I'm there every year. I go to John's Bach concerts and his rehearsals. I went to a wonderful rehearsal. Maybe it was 2-3 years ago or something like that, where he was explaining the cantatas and rehearsing it. And I try to make my schedule so I'm free for at least some of Graham's classes, because I never want to miss those. And then Bill came on board.
Thank you for the segue. Here we go. Bill.
What year did I come? I can't remember.
I think
2012.
12. There you go. John, you can just take over.
Okay.
Because we did that American Songbook concert.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. So
That
it's
was
what,
2012.
is that the one we have been looking at that you very elegantly edited with you and your lovely lady friend and me and my lovely lady friend? Is that right? Was the same one? Is that the one? It's so beautifully put together now.
My lovely baritone friend, Bill Sharp.
Oh, in fact, it was great to see it again because John Musto got it all together to a really playable shape, and it just goes like a dream. I can't believe it. I didn't expect I would sit through the whole thing because, gosh, we've seen ourselves perform before, but it was also, gosh, it was lovely. 2012, that's 9 years ago. And it looks so wonderful, and there was such enthusiasm. That's one of the things that, of course, is so great, is all that youthful enthusiasm. People are just, it's like the wildest, I don't know, prize fight maybe, or no, better. But the audience of all those other singers is the audience that, you dream of, is all that enthusiasm and avidness and their application, because after all, most of them singers, after all, want to be in on everything that's happening. So it's been such a pleasure every time we've been there.
What's your work process before a concert like that? So how much of it is improvised? How much do you rehearse? How much is written down?
Well, of course, I love the wonderful Gershwin 18 very short pieces that he put together in a publication. And they're just little 2-pagers. They were actually at the behest of his friend and ours too, Kay Swift, wonderful lady who actually wrote a couple of standards, was one of the first graduates from the which was Walter Domesh's music school, which became Juilliard. She was there before it was Juilliard. And Kay was this wonderful person through whom we met so many people of that whole ilk. And there was always that certain kind of openness and Catholicity approach. I mean, nobody was smart. No, I got to meet the wonderful Burton Lane over at Kay's place, and he could perform his own songs to a fairly well. He should have done a show of him doing it, playing and singing. Such a professional. So, I mean, we really got to know all kinds of other musicians that you don't normally run into, which is, of course, what I've always loved. And that's what I did, because I've always had a finger in 10 million pies. Whatever interests me, I went to. You expecting to be able to do high modern, very difficult, or classic leader, or so, and then bang, they can do, I don't know, Little Richard, I guess. But you never know, and that's what I love, the idea of this whole kind of. It's what I'd always hoped would happen. I see it now, a couple of very healthy instances. It does my heart good to see it.
John, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, as to our process, I mean, Bill and Joni have certain numbers they do. Amy and I have certain numbers they do. I've done a bunch of things with Bill, a lot of things with Bill. But then when we sit at two pianos. We just say, okay, I'm going to take the first eight, you take the second eight, we'll do the bridge, and it's.
And then we just go. And and you do it completely improvised. I mean, all of those little, none of that was written out. For some reason, we seem to be able to trip over each other without stumbling. And it's a marvelous experience. I love doing it, and it makes you aware of the fact that we both seem to know what has to be done, and it just depends on whether you're in the secondo or the primo.
And Bill and Joni were our mentors in this. Every time they played New York, we were there, and we got a lot of stuff from Bill and Joni watching them over the years.
Well, one of the things I suppose I have to call my own innovation, and that is I'm probably the only accompanist who would start out talking before the singer sings, and because this way, particularly when we're doing what we consider a kind of an instruction manual for people who need to get to know the big five composers, the Rodgers and Hart and Gershwin and Cole Porter and Newman and all those other wonderful people we've spent some time working with, and not a single one is. I mean, U.B. Blake, I had a great chance to get to know very well, worked with him, and so that whole crossover sort of thing is something that was very much true with Steve Breyer and so on. So this is very much in the air right now, and it's like we're finding ourselves as a different kind of cat than maybe any particular European country might be, because we're sort of all of them at once. At the same time, we seem to be open to all these things. There's some effort, of course, by the conservatory approach that it was possible to put it down. No longer is happening. Nowadays, we see people are taking it all quite seriously and having a wonderful time doing it. And it infuses what they do with the standard repertory. If you can look at a Lied, which after all originally was thought was a popular song in the first incarnation, it became heightened by the Schubert, the Schumann, and the other people who decided to do it. But it was meant to be kind of popular. If you look at Haydn or Mozart, little arias or little songs, they were not as momentous as, say, a real Schumann cycle, which is quite earth-shaking and just complexity and so on. But that's something that was a later development. It started out as a pop thing. So there's a connection between those two things, I think, in that life, in that world. And for us, it's a sine qua non. If you want to learn how to set English in an American style, I've always said that the French had the troubadours, the Germans had the mini singers, and we had Irving Berlin. They decided the basics of the American style of prosody for all of us. And every one of the major songwriters made the debt to this Berlin because it was a second language for him. His first language was Yiddish, so he could be very discerning and analytical about a second language the way you may not have in the first language. That's quite. Joseph Conrad, who only learned English at the age of 21, one of the great English stylists. So that's sort of what Berlin's function was. He set it out the way it should go, and you just know the rightness of that man. With the 1,300 lyrics or so, every one of them works, and he's really a stylistic hub. He's the biggest cookie in the business of how to set English. I think for Americans.
It's been really interesting to see what singing this repertoire that you and John are talking about does to young singers, and how they indeed translate that into a less stilted and more natural, often more connected delivery of other styles. And besides, it's huge fun.
Good. Listen to my tale of woe. It's terribly sad but true. All dressed up, no place to go. Each evening I'm awfully blue. I must win some miss. Can't go on like this. I could blossom out, I know, with somebody just like you. So sweet and lovely, lady good. Oh, lady good. somehow they don't respond. They stagger but never fall. Winter's gone and now it's spring. Love, where is thy sting? If somebody won't respond, I'm going to end it all. So
I guess that was the first.
Yeah, I did. I was saying I have learned so much about playing the piano from watching Bill and listening to him over the years. He's just the most elegant pianist.
I think you both are. I mean, it's wonderful. And John, I had to smile. We have this thing at SongFest watching you. You know, when your leg goes up, that's when the improv starts.
And it's kind of, it goes up a lot in lots of different repertoire.
Well, actually, I'm so thankful that John, in a way, is sort of in a way an offshoot, because with my arthritis and neuropathy, I don't have anywhere near the elegant fluency that I once had. But I do the best I can with what I have left, and so we get along. Joan is the same. She has a much shorter range than she used to have, and so I'm
technically a female baritone.
But we go on anyway, because I mean the recordings of us that are, so to speak, are elegantist are down there. They're there. They were, anybody wants to listen to them, there they are. So we've done that. So now we just do it because we want to, and people ask us. We have not. What's our next gig? We're going to be on the 10th of February. We will do a third cabaret for Carytown Concert House in Ann Arbor, who asked us to do things to be streamed. KCH, look for live at the 4:15, and you can see the two we've already done.
And John put the concert we did 2012 up on YouTube. Bless you, John, for doing that. So you guys can see us, such as we is.
It was a pleasure to look at it again. My gosh.
That's exactly right. And that's where that concert recording was from. I'd like to pivot a little bit to John Harbison. So, John, you have a strong interest in jazz as well, and you're a pianist, and you have an ensemble, a jazz ensemble. Is that correct? Or used to have?
Well, I play with the MIT Faculty Jazz Ensemble. SIN, Strength in Numbers, and we perform. We're actually very legitimately all faculty members. We don't perform much, but I coach. That's mainly my teaching gig now. Is coaching jazz ensembles. I'm not a pianist. I don't play from notes, so I play only as a jazz ensemble. Well, I guess my note playing is pretty private. I've been going through the Bach Art of the Fugue. Finally got to number 14 actually. And I play each year at our little festival in Wisconsin, Token Creek Festival. But that's my entire pianistic activity. And to hear me play, you would really say I'm a student pianist. But the jazz playing really, started early, and I still write for jazz ensembles, vocal jazz ensembles particularly.
Wow.
Which is fun, and actually performing, in terms of performing, conducting, which is of course the safest of all, because no one hears anything that you do.
Yeah, to
you hear our mistakes only in terms of the player's confusion.
To kind of follow up on that, so just like there's a big space at SongFest for American Songbook, one of the very special things that you have done over the years is to bring Bach to SongFest, which is so much more rare, I think, in this country than what I was used to in Germany. I mean, in Germany, every spring there's 7 Matthew Passions in Berlin. So I grew up with that. You could just walk into a church and there you go. And I'm just so grateful for you bringing this to the festival and just playing particularly the cantatas. I know it started at Emmanuel Music. So could you talk a little bit more about that? John, where does your Bach love start, and particularly the cantatas?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was very, very early. I got interested in the Bach cantatas when I was a high school kid, and put together a group in college and also in graduate school, just a cantata ensemble. And then, of course, I got a job. First job I got when I got to Boston, they were looking for a conductor with the cantata singers, which was the Bach ensemble. So I did that for a while, and then was a founding member of this group at Emmanuel Music. My friend Craig Smith took that over and led it for 40 years. He came, as did the entire faculty of Emmanuel Music, for quite a few summers, and then various subgroups of that faculty, and then we continued to do Bach cantatas at SongFest for over many years. Yeah, the Bach culture is the cantata culture is I think it continues to grow. It's, I think, the most difficult music that anyone will ever sing. We still don't know where he thought people were going to breathe, or in fact, how those original singers, who were usually younger, in fact, than Tanglewood singers, they were 16, 17 years old, how they negotiated those parts. But it's still, I'd say, the music that I am in an ongoing study. Each time I do a piece at Emmanuel, restudy and try to really, it's more than learning the notes, of course. It's learning what it's about and why it's on that Sunday and how it fits into the larger framework. But it's in certain ways it has a nice Bach connection, because continual playing is still it's not an improvised form, but is one which you are still on the spot, on the day, navigating your way through those really quite challenging rivers of water that Bach creates. So yeah, I think for singers, they come to some of them come actually to SongFest not having sung Bach before, and I think the present pedagogy of American music schools means that it's very possible to get a quote vocal singing education without touching on that music. So I think that's a good thing that they embrace that challenge, and it is a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us, those who are leading it and those who are performing it.
Yes, I mean, I think there's just so much more, just speaking of Baroque, there's so much more Handel everywhere. And it was interesting for me coming from Germany, because in Germany, I would say it was nearly reversed.
Yeah, Handel's finally made it again as an opera composer, which is great. After a long period where he wasn't around too much in the theater, he's back, which is that's the music of that era that singers will tend to have gotten to know. The Bach cantatas are, I would say that the presence of Bach cantatas is growing in the United States, and we're less likely to find, say, in a group of Tanglewood students, a lack of experience in that music. More often now, people have encountered it.
Some of it is the rise also, I think, of the historical performance programs. Some of them are still fairly recent, like from 140, the duet "Wenn kommst du mein Heil."
140, I remember it. Good performance. That was an area only evening, as I remember. Let's hear that, because at least that's music that people might know somewhat and can appreciate. I think that the sort of SongFest environment. This was in a concert performance, an aria performance.
That's correct.
It's Josh and
Josh Quinn,
yeah.
a wonderful alum who went on to do very well in the Wigmore competition, wonderful singer, and Emily Yocum Black.
and Emily Yocum,
Wonderful
very
soprano.
good singers. Yeah.
Yeah, really
Good.
good singer. So
Yeah.
let's hear that. Just for the sake of time, that's indeed a beautiful performance, John. Is that David Bolin playing the violin?
Yeah, David Bowen, and
Really wonderful.
that's right. That's a very interesting text, of course, because it's the Jesus as the bridegroom, but it's also very much a trope on a love duet, and the singers have to really inhabit both those worlds.
So now that we've talked about everything other than your own music, I'd love to pivot a little bit to your own music.
My first pop song was a pop song. I was age 14, Big Orange Moon, with my own lyric. It's an essence of adolescence piece.
Oh, that sounds fun. I've been sort of resurrecting my old stuff too for things. I just did a piece for the Fisher Duo for cello and piano, and I pulled out a tune I'd thought about the age of 11 and made variations. Just, it's kind of fun to reconnect to the old self, and it's interesting. Maybe it's because the grooves in our cerebrum, we're getting down deeper into the grooves a little bit because everything else is sort of canceling out. So now we're back to the age 12. Terrible.
It's possible. Yeah.
John, what about you?
Yeah, well, songs, I just, it was the poetry that got me into it. I just love the poetry.
Speaking about poetry, so I dared to give you an assignment, which is I don't know why I would do that, but I asked you to find a poem to read, and John, you had an interesting answer about why you actually would not like to read, but Bill and John Harbison, you might read for us a little bit later. So John Musto, why don't you want to read for us today?
Oh, because I'm terrible at it. That's all. And I had to do. Rosemary asked me to do a little something about a couple of my songs and talk about them. This is way back, and I remember maybe it was the summer. I don't know. And I set everything up and I said, okay, I'm going to read, I'm going to read a portion of this poem. I'm going to talk about it. And it was, okay, no, that's terrible. Let's retake that. No, that's terrible. Let's retake that. And I just, when my feeling about this is our way of speaking a poem is the way we said it. We decide what the tempo is. We decide where the breaks are. We decide what the atmosphere is, and that's really how we speak poetry in the end. But I'm actually I'm not a public speaker at all, and I'm not good at it. So, but these two have spent a lot of time with poetry. I know, John, you're actually a poet, yes?
Well, it's at one stage. I guess, in the great tradition of lyric poetry, it stopped abruptly.
Okay, Bill studied with Roethke.
I studied with Theodore Roethke.
Yeah, these guys know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I was lucky enough to be at the University of Washington at the time that Theodore Roethke was there teaching. And I was coming in as a very young student. I was actually, I was able to do any kind of English class I wanted to. I could have minored in English because I tested out everything. So I could take grad courses. I wanted to study Milton, so I studied with a very famous Milton scholar. And I was a kid in the audience, in this whole class of all grad students, and I'm 17. So, but it's always been fascinating. I fell in love with William Blake, particularly Songs of Innocence and Experience, which was something I vowed when I was a freshman at the University of Washington. I would set the whole Songs of Innocence and Experience, and worked on it off and on for 25 years, and finally premiered it in 1982. And it was a very important thing for me to find out that I was going to be needing somehow all of my various styles to be able to to deal with the multiplicity of styles that Blake's own poetry kind of touches on and invokes it. So I just took what he showed me and made it from there, but sometimes very surprising choices. But the fun part was to see that it all works somehow. But I got fascinated by the whole business of it. And Roethke was a fine teacher. He basically, we talked about the mechanics of putting together trimeters, 3-beat lines, tetrameters, 4-beat lines, pentameter, and so on. And all the good cases of each of those. So we would study lines. We would come with a collection of lines we found of the particular amateurs that we were using at that time. And then we were hoping to do maybe a short poem in the same length of line. And so that was one way to do it. And he was very careful about how everything was worked. And it was like you learned with him. It was almost like laying a poem down is laying like a line of bricks onto this structure. And so it gave me a whole attitude. I didn't want to go study Introduction to Poetry. I really wanted to go with the old line of the poem must not mean but be, because the actual musicality of the poem has a lot to do with how you said it. There is always an implied melody somewhere in the language, and you want to find what the curve of the line is there. And then you take it from there, and you find out that Blake evidently made little tunes for many of the songs of Innocence and Experience himself. And but somebody's supposed to write them down, and nobody's ever been able to find them. But I imagine it'd be rather simple. I got to know Allen Ginsberg a little bit, and we were taking a plane back from, he was going to go back to, I had to go to New York anyway, and he was coming back to New York. And so we started talking about Blake, and he made some wonderful, very Blaking kind of tunes that sort of a little bit close to what I think old Billy might have done on his own. This is, I think, the whole point, is that Blake very strongly tied to not only the most vernacular styles of his time, but also the high metaphysicals of the early 16th century, all the way and through Dryden, and so your 17th all the way through there. So you have a lot of that stuff that is in these Songs of Innocence and Experience. Some of the poems are very high line, and some are almost like the songsters did. I actually have a few of these little books sung to the tunes of. They're about this big, and in them are essentially words to the tune of, which is essentially what the Beggar's Opera is. In 1728, he took tunes from Purcell and from Handel and from folk song and from this and that. And John Gay put together new lyrics, and that is what the Beggar's Opera is. And of course, the later thing from Brecht and Weill was the Three Penny Operas, was an outgrowth of that. So the idea was to use the vernacular in an elegant way, which is the birth of Lied also. That was also most of it at that particular time. Where it's an interesting question that how much does the poem, what is it, 50-50, 30-70? What's the relationship, and what do we expect when we hear a song from Schumann versus a song from Cole Porter? So that's kind of
Bill, do you mean the relationship, sort of the weight between the music and the words?
Oh yeah,
that's kind of the age-old question.
Well, in both of them, they are absolutely important, but the way they're going to be delivered is going to be very different, and so you really need to deal with those things when you write. I have to sort of appeal to the performers I want. One of the things when I met Joan Morris, and I realized that she could do all the classical things, but her whole background was much wider and is very strong for the American Songbook. And that's where we started our whole career, is to go out there and basically pay attention to the song itself rather than our spin on it. And I think that's what turned out to be our style. Our style was not an imposed style on it. We didn't do a number. We gave you the song, all the lyric and musical elegance of these songs. And I would say that the best of this particular tradition can stand right up against the best of the whole leader tradition in Europe.
And I just have to butt in here and say, find and read Joni's book on how she prepares these songs with Bill. It's fascinating, and it could be, you would prepare a Schubert song the same way. It's quite brilliant.
The book is called Let Me Sing and I'm Happy, and it's Joan's essentially how she works and something of our history together and so on. It can be ordered from Pendragon Press, and it's a damn good book. I'm just amazed. She worked on it off and on for a number of years, and a very good friend of ours helped her put it together finally. Well,
Bill, did you want to read us a Roethke poem, and then I'd love to hear John Harbison. I think, John, you promised to read some Louise Glück.
Oh yeah, okay. The Bat. By day, the bat is cousin to the mouse. He likes the attic of an aging house. His fingers make a hat about his head. His pulse beat is so slow we think him dead. He loops in crazy figures half the night among the trees that face the corner light. But when he brushes up against the screen, we are afraid of what our eyes have seen. For something is amiss or out of place when mice with wings can wear a human face. That's one. But this is his father coming into a lot of his poems. Theodore Roethke had to do with Rosa. My Papa's Waltz. The whiskey on your breath could make a small boy dizzy, but I hung on like death. Such waltzing was not easy. We romped until the pan slid from the kitchen shelf. My mother's countenance could not unfrown itself. The hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle. At every step you missed, my right ear scraped a buckle. You beat time on my head with a palm caked hard by dirt, then waltzed me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt.
Thank you so much for sharing, Bill. John, I think you might have chosen something completely different, and then I'd love to play a clip of a setting of yours. John, do you want to put it in context for us?
Well, Louise Glück, I've set a lot of her poems, and she's a friend of mine. She lives very few blocks away from me, actually. She doesn't really enjoy poems of hers being read, so I hope she's not listening. But it's a poem I've always thought, it's an early poem of hers, which I've always thought is about the sense of vocation that everyone who is going to make a poem or a piece of music you kind of remember that moment when you knew what you wanted to do. And that's what I think this is about. It's called Poem. In the early evening, as now, a man is bending over his writing table. Slowly he lifts his head. A woman appears carrying roses. Her face floats to the surface of the mirror, marked with the green spokes of rose stems. It is a form of suffering. Then always the transparent page raised to the window until its veins emerge as words finally filled with ink. And I am meant to understand what binds them together, or to the gray house held firmly in place by dusk, because I must enter their lives. It is spring, the pear tree filming with weak white blossoms.
Great.
Haunting, beautiful song, John.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I couldn't find when you wrote it. When did you write this, John?
I think it was 3 summers ago. It was a standalone original. I filled in some more songs around it, but
Mhm.
yeah, original.
Is it published? Because I was trying to look for it.
My publisher and I have sort of parted ways, so I'm self-publishing.
Mhm.
So you are speaking to the publisher.
Okay, so it's available to those who would like to sing
Yeah, yeah.
and play it.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful performance. Wonderful piano.
Wonderful performance. Yeah, great. I wasn't there at that point anymore, but
Great.
they put it together. Yeah.
You still got your chops, man.
You're right, Bill. Though after 80, you have to kind of assert you're there because there's a certain perception. Yeah, I agree.
We want to, it's perfectly normal that younger people come in and they want their space. They want to hog anything. But if they want something, let's be kind enough to give it to them.
Yeah.
Well, I think
We don't. That's like,
I speak for thousands of people in the SongFest community that we want to hear from you musically and otherwise. John Musto, I was actually wondering, since you didn't read a poem, whether we might want to listen to your interpretation of one of your songs.
What do you want to hear?
I'm partial to river songs because I also really like the cello playing on there. Could you tell us a little bit about that cycle?
Okay, so this, the clip you have, I think, is the second song.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about the river being iced over, and it's kind of a gloss on Schubert's Auf dem Flusse from Winterreise, because he talks about the same thing, the calm of the ice on the water that belies what might be going on underneath. So that was the idea of the setting. It starts out the same way, and it kind of shadows the way that song is structured.
I didn't know that. Now I want to listen to them back to back, but we'll hear river songs for now.
Sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thoughts, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say, and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there, hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say.
Now, after hearing you talk about, go, John. I didn't mean to interrupt you. John Harbison.
I just like the song.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yes. And after hearing John talk about sort of the reading of the poem, I don't know, I was following the climaxes and how you said the emphasis of the words,
Mhm.
word by word. I was trying to analyze how you're reading it. I don't know if it was just me. Um, anyway, wonderful song.
The poem dictates it to a great extent, and you take it from there. Really, at least I know how to do that. So do you. So we all. This is what it is. What's curious is because all the three of us are performing composers. At least to some extent, and that is what used to be the standard rule. Sometime in the 20th century, there was a kind of feeling among academe that composing was beneath you if you were a pianist, or that actually being a pianist was beneath you. When I was in graduate school, everybody was putting down, "Oh, you're still a pianist," and then as if that was something too terrible. And then they asked me to play their song. So it's you run into the same kind of thing. It's just people at a certain point there was a real stigma against the performing composers. But the history of pretty much everyone we play now or listen to was themselves a performing composer. And it was all part of the thing, and we're sort of almost a renaissance, the three of us, because not a lot of people are. I think it's becoming more and more of a kind of thing where people are taking their performing ability and integrating with the rest of their composing selves. But it was sort of frowned on for a number of years.
Bill, may I ask you to introduce one of my favorite pieces of yours? I'm partial to it because I've played it, but we're not going to listen to a recording of me playing it. Let Evening Come,
Yeah.
Which is just such a stunning setting of Jane Kenyon.
Oh yeah.
It's one of Rosemary's actually very most favorite poets.
Well, what happened was there was this lady from Tuscaloosa who her husband had died, and she said she would like to have me actually do something with Benita Valente, and she picked one poem by Maya Angelou, who is not normally somebody I find myself reading. But she is a wonderful reader. She could probably read a telephone book and have you in tears because she's such an expressive reader. But a poem that I was given was about Maya Angelou mourning the deaths of a fair number of very important African Americans who were poets, killings, and several people had all died in a certain kind of quick succession. And so the first one was that, and of course that's the one I was asked to do. And I said, if you do that, you're going to get everybody up there, and they'll be gone a minute and a half. So don't do that. We have to put that as part of a cycle. So I suddenly realized that that particular poem, the one that had been Maya Angelou, was almost like a recitative because it sort of told you the story. And so I said, okay, we have a little Baroque aria based kind of little cantata, solo cantata here. And it was going to be, actually the whole thing started from, Benita called me and said, I want to have a duet with me and Tatiana Troyanos. And I said, terrific, that'll be great. Then Tatiana, who had been under, I understand, a number of years of terrible pain because she wouldn't want to give up performing despite the pain she had, and it was eventually enough to kill her. So that suddenly she just died to everybody's surprise, but people knew that she had been just gritting her teeth because she did not want to be killed by the pain. She went through the pain until finally it was just too much for her. And so Benita called me. She said, I have an idea. Why don't we replace Tatiana with the violist Michael Tree of the Gournay Quartet? And Michael and we're very old friends. And I said, that's a wonderful idea. So it'll be she'll be the kind of viola obbligata, so Michael will be the viola obligato, which is what he essentially turned out to be. And then the text was there, and I said, okay. So our first one would be, this is the recitative, followed by the arioso. And I found a poem by Emily Dickinson, which I used as a second poem. And that was the one that turned out we had to pay for because it was a Harvard edition, which happened in the 1950s. So we had to pay royalties to Emily Dickinson, which I'm sure, well, she's past scary probably. But that was that. Then I suddenly said, oh, there's a poem by my dear friend, Jane Kenyon, which is Let Evening Come. And that to me seems to be the aria. So we have a recitative, arioso, and an aria, just like so many cantatas by Telemann and Bach and whoever of that particular period. So it's like a Baroque cantata in that sense. So that's how we ended up with that. And the last poem Well, I knew Jane because she was married, of course, to wonderful Donald Hall, and we were all very great friends. And he had married her after he had divorced his wife way before, and they went off to a place. It turns out it had been an ancestral home of Donald Hall's family, and they spent 20 years there. It's a little place on Highway 4 in New Hampshire. So anyway, I would go there and visit them because we would finish our touring, Joan and I, about that same time. I mean, more than one time we would stop by and have a cup of coffee, or at least maybe even a meal with them. And then Jane died, and it was just one of those kind of shocking moments. So it became the whole thing sort of became the whole cantata turned out to be in memory of Jane. After they had had 20 wonderful years together, and she was gone, and she was probably, well, of course, the love of his life and one of the great poems. And her poems have become gone through several printings. They reach you emotionally quite well. And she was just a delightful, wonderful person. I was just so shocked when it happened. So that's essentially how that all happened. And I remember when Benita had to premiere this. This is at the point where actually she had not yet died, Jane. She was quite sick. She couldn't come. And but we were able to send her a cassette in those days, and she could play it over and over and over again. And then I was working on another cycle with Jane, which would turn out to be Briefly It Enters, several poems, all of Jane, rather than just three poets. And and I said, it's going to be some time before we can actually get it out and done. She said, what do I have to do? Waiting for it? Is it like Christmas? She said. And I said, I'm afraid so. And unfortunately, she never got to hear it, that whole cycle.
So maybe we'll just listen a little bit to the opening of it because it's so striking. So that would be the Maya Angelou poem.
Oh, sure.
And this is performed by Laura Strickling, and actually not to get morbid in this discussion, but by a wonderful Los Angeles-based young violist who actually passed away. Since that was another story. And Lucas Wong, wonderful pianist who has worked with you on a number of things.
Oh, sure.
reminisce, whisper to us they existed. They existed. We can be and be better. For they exist.
Thank you, Bill.
Bravo.
They were doing them very well. I had, I mean, Lucas, of course, I know for many years. He's a very veteran kind of performer from Hong Kong. He's excellent, I think. Right. She's fine too. Okay.
So, everybody, now that I've exhausted you for well over an hour, do you have any words of wisdom for young people who might be watching? I mean, this is obviously a very difficult time for just, it seems like a lot of reasons, and then every day adds new reasons and new anxieties. What can we take solace in, and what should we focus on? What's important? The volunteer.
Well, if you're in the artistic world, it's a great chance for a little space to do some things. At least I've been finding, even with the disorientation, there are little oases of time where the thing that you plan to do and haven't had a chance, you might have a chance. Because the schedule is good to have just to prompt us, but sometimes unprompted is what we need. Some space to not be prompted.
That's very true.
So I've been encouraging my friends to look for those, because I think they're there. Those spots are there. You might try to do something that you would not normally think you have time to do.
Advice. What do we have to give for advice? Well, to young composers, I think I would say, don't give up your instrument. Do continue to perform at least some. I really mostly perform, if I do these days, with my wife, because I've been doing that for 40 plus years. But the point is, if you can't remember how it feels to connect with an audience, you lose something in the ability to communicate to the singers and thus to an audience. It helps enormously to remember you're making real music in a real environment with real people. At least at least listening, I'm hoping right now. But of course, in normal times, we'd have a bunch of people there in the room with you, and now we have to pretend they're there. But other than that, it's really a good idea to kind of keep that fire burning, because it's very important to have something. I didn't expect. I tried more than once to try to give up. I never wanted to be a concert pianist per se. The idea didn't interest me. Why should I do all this? Richard Good could play better Beethoven than I can. I can think of lots of other people who could be able to do all kinds of things that I would prefer not to bother with, because they cover it so well. I'm not needed there, but I am needed when it comes to having some sense of how to perform what I do myself, and also some idea. But if I were to be working on a song, one of your two Johns, I would take the same kind of care about it and learning as a pianist as they do, from the point of view of a composer, noticing what other composers do. But there are a lot of tangential things that sort of from a distance, it'd be easier probably to see that we have more alike in certain ways than maybe a whole bunch of 3 or 4 other people. I don't know, probably because we all are still somehow in the performance business and keeping that alive. That's what I think keeps the vitality in the music. I do feel that don't let your teachers tell you you don't have to perform anymore. If you can, don't lose that contact. It's very important.
John?
Well, I don't know how much more I can add to that. I think we don't know what's going to come out of all of this. There already are new ways of getting music to people. And I think some of them even when we get out of this lockdown, some of them will remain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little wary of when young people ask for advice about their careers. You know what? It's such a different world. I have no idea. With all these platforms and all these, I try to keep a safe distance from them, to tell you the truth. They know much better about how to go about a career than I do at this point.
Me too.
And I would just say, be aware of other people that are interested in the same thing. We've talked about NIFOS. There's SongFest, there's Cincinnati Song Festival, there's Sparks and Wiry Cries, there's Lyric Fest in Philadelphia. There's a lot of people interested in the song, world. Don't expect to buy a co-op with what you make on art song, but it's a worthy cause.
No, that's for sure.
Hope so.
And yeah, thank you for mentioning all of these organizations. So we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of one, and there's certainly a lot of very ardent champions of that cause. And I think Rosemary and her team are one, and everybody who comes to the festival as well. So I am just very grateful for your time. It's amazing to be with you. And thank you for sharing your music. I loved hearing these recordings. A lot of these performances I've heard live, but it was just so nice to hear them again and to hear your music and your playing and your conducting. So let's hope to see each other on the other side of it and not on screen anymore very soon.
I hope so too.
Thank you. Thank you, Liza.
Okay, great to see you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye, you guys.
Bye-bye.